The lawsuit to block Donald Trump's UFC fight in front of the White House has legs, folks. Federal judge, after a stipulation that the judge wanted the parties to enter into, is ordering the Trump regime to respond on Tuesday to this complaint, which seeks to block the UFC fight. And this is actually a pretty powerful lawsuit, especially given the precedent that has developed, especially lately, around Donald Trump defacing things in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump tearing down the East Wing of the White House, putting his name on the Kennedy Center, and the Trump Kennedy Center. The name Trump had to be removed, and that was like unlawful vandalism. The arguments made by Trump DOJ lawyers that once they do it, they can do whatever they want, and then a party loses standing, to make it very clear, okay, well, we got to block the illegal conduct because they're just going to argue once it happens, there's no standing for any remedial measures. And so armed with a body of case law, I never thought I'd say this as a law professor, involving the president of the United States unconstitutionally defacing and destroying things in Washington, D.C. without congressional approval, these plaintiffs have gone into court using the same legal arguments we've now succeed in these multiple other examples, East Wing, Kennedy Center, and other examples, to say, Judge, and it's been assigned to Judge Mehta of all judges. We'll talk about the import of that in a second. Judge, we need to shut down this UFC fight because it's illegal. It's unlawful, the argument goes. And it's saying, you know, look, you have it being completely run by a private organization, the UFC. It's being broadcast on a streaming service, Paramount Plus, that requires people to pay $8 or $9 a month to get access to it. So there's gatekeeping away from the public. The White House can't delegate to some private entity, the UFC. The UFC is now using the White House to put up crypto billboards and to sell things, to sell advertising across the White House. Like, you can't do that. They're selling $1.5 million tickets, the right-wing oligarch buds of Donald Trump, in order to, I guess, recoup their $70 million cost. They're putting this gigantic claw structure in there, which makes the White House now look like what Six Flags would look like in a dystopian zombie movie. Looks like a junkyard, if you will. Like, you know, those zombie movies, like where it's like in the future and like there's like grass growing and decay. Like, it just looks out of some freaking, you know, dystopian zombie movie. And they basically say you add all of this together and it's a cauldron of criminality that's taking place. And Judge, you have no choice. You have to block this from happening because it will cause irreparable harm to the country, you know, if this illegal thing is allowed to take place, you know, and notably also, other than that day being Donald Trump's birthday, there's no real significant import about why the fight has to go down that day, or just because Donald Trump and UFC announced it was going to take place, that by itself shouldn't be the reason why the Trump regime goes, well, we can't unwind it now. No, you argued once something happens, then you can't unwind it. Well, the event hasn't happened. So if the federal judge grants an injunction and blocks the fight, what's the worst that it gets rescheduled? Well, Donald Trump and Dana White are going to be upset that, like, the worst case scenario, if you're to me, Judge Mehta, and you block this thing from happening, and then later you have briefing and it's determined that this event should take, you just do it in a month, do it in 2 months. But no, little baby Donald and baby Dana White and all of these right-wing oligarchs, the same people who want to shut down Madison Square Garden, 5 blocks, 2 avenues, so Donald Trump can fall asleep while he's getting booed there. They have to do it now. We need it like a little baby. And it's like, no offense to little babies, but like, that's not a compelling legal reason. I want to bring in Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Substack, and podcast. And Harry, maybe at the end of your analysis, touch upon Judge Mehta and his import here. But before getting there, as I look at it, if you're a judge First and foremost, the Trump regime, what they're going to argue. Tuesday, their briefing is due. They're going to argue standing. That's like where they're going to, these people don't have standing. They shouldn't be allowed to bring it. If you get past the standing issue, though, Harry, what great argument do they? It seems like a pretty much a home run case against this thing. I mean, could you imagine any other president goes, I want to do on the White House a festival that's run. I love techno music. I want a techno concert at the White House. It's like, no.
I'd say an extra base hit, maybe. But yeah, so we've had a series of cases. They're doing this again and again where they're completely running roughshod over Congress, completely trampling the law, but relying on standing and the cowed Republicans in the Congress. Got a Substack on this just yesterday on the Talking Feds channel, how they really are going to new lows. And yeah, let's start with the law. Let's not even start. You described it so well, but I'm looking at the complaint and looking at this gargantuan, hideous, 92-foot tall, 154-foot wide cage built for the king, so the king can be with his royal jesters, can enjoy the UFC match, and it's so up his alley. And by the way, they want also to have the weigh-in at the Lincoln Memorial, and why not? So look, under the law, you imagine you can't. And by the way, the people who are doing it are private, are making money. Trump seems to be making some money. Surprise, surprise. If there's, any way that the government could let something like this happen, it would be after a lot of filters to make sure. I mean, seriously, what's next? Like, bullfighting with dogs, or with kind of cage, Roman emperor matches. This is like garish, gross, inane, and there are legal mechanisms in place to keep it from happening. And basically, that's what the complaint sets out. So it's all these kinds of, you got to do this, you didn't do that. There's no even regulation here. They haven't even tried to submit the paperwork. It's just like, the UFC baked for the king to come forward. It's sort of, it's one of these stories that you think, did The Onion do that? Like that you look at this thing and it is sort of hilarious, but really gross. And honestly, talk about a disfigurement of the White House and the Lincoln Memorial with the words of the second inaugural. It's so crass. It's so gaudy. It's so Trump. All right, Judge Meida. He's, remember the whole DC bench have, they were there for the 3 years working with all the cases of the January 6th insurrectionists, only to have their work just robbed out in a quick pardon on the first day. They really have been laboring in the trenches, starting with the then Chief Judge Jeb Boasberg. So Meida has been the judge on a number of cases that have been pretty big, have really taken him to task. He's a solid and serious judge. But now I come to the hard part, because as you say, they're always going with standing first, and I expect that's what you will get on Tuesday. It's been brought by two people who essentially are saying it's so ugly it makes you want to throw up, and that's the sort of injury. There is one woman who she is forced, an elderly woman, to take her a different route than she would normally have, that supposedly causes her pain and inconvenience. But really, the two folks here, the other guy's a Vietnam vet who is basically disgusted by it. I mean, it really is the sort of injury that most judges, including Judge Maida, would not greenlight the standing for, but they've been ordered to respond, and it behooves them. They're going to have to come in and show why they're going to win, and not just talk about standing. And standing can go different ways when you have they're saying we have a real individual injury, but it's a pretty ethereal, vaporous one, I think would be fair to call it. But if they get over cocky and just assume they're going to win on standing, they could be in for a bad surprise. And as you say, I really would love to hear the portion of Judge Maida's opinion saying irreparable injury. On the one hand, the injury they're having, they get every day. On the other hand, baby boy Don Trump in his little shorts swinging his fist against the ground. What is the injury that it has to take place a week, 2-3 weeks later? I'd like also to see, and I think we will see, by the way, they're going to come in and ask to just put this on ice. And that means they're going to say we're likely to win. That's one of the sort of inquiries there. So I think we're going to see the Department of Justice's irreparable injury analysis that King Donald doesn't get his pageant just when he wants it. Mm-hmm. And that alone will be the price of admission. So in summary, really gaudy, Trumpian, ugly, very possibly illegal, but as in other cases, a definite uphill battle on standing.
Well, yeah, but that's why they need to, there has to be somebody who has standing. Like, if there's no one who has standing possible in the country, that's a deeply problematic concept. This is an injury being caused, and so to me, if I'm the plaintiff, I'm also thinking through, do I have any backup people, also to substitute in and judge? Here are the two people we had, but I could be bringing in the historical preservation society. It's still a public grounds. Bring in somebody else, because to me, that piece can be cured. But if I'm Judge Maida, the question that I'm asking the DOJ is, if I block this, what are the consequences? What happens? Why can't you reschedule this in a month from now or 2 months from now, right? And the response back will be, oh, UFC is gonna lose money or so and so. And it's like, okay, so what? Like I'd rather UFC lose money, which, by the way, we know Trump is invested in the parent company. They may lose their money, sure, but the constitutional injury is way more severe. Then you should have thought about that. I'm going to push it back a month or 2 months. You can potentially do your fight, but the court sees this, and I got to take some action, because I don't want to, go back to Kathleen Williams, where she sees a fraud in her court. I'm observing. This is brought to my attention. It's like, go buy a cop, start waving around a gun and, and a bag of drugs and say, what are you going to do about it? At some point you got to be like, okay, no, I'm going to take it away. Harry, I'll give you the final word.
I just want to say this Supreme Court has made it clear. It's a tough adage, but the fact that nobody has standing is not an argument for standing, they've said. So yeah, it means there are these grievous situations. It's the stock and trade of the Department of Justice these days. But they really want to say, we saw this just last week vividly. You mean to tell me, they asked the department lawyer, that you can just tear down the Statue of Liberty and nobody can do anything about it? That's right. That's exactly what we mean to tell you. So standing can be really tough medicine as interpreted by this Supreme Court.
And it's why now every piece of legislation from here on out has to specifically specify, and here's who has standing, because apparently the ambiguity that would always be resolved in the take care clause, that the president will faithfully take care that our laws are executed faithfully. When you don't have someone faithfully executing, that was the protection against ambiguity in laws, that you were going to execute the law. And now when you don't do that, then I guess no one has a remedy. Anyway, we'll dig into that in a future video. Make sure you all subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel. It's called Talking Feds. So as soon as this ends, search Talking Feds, subscribe to Harry's channel. Thanks, Harry.
Hey, thanks, Ben.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.